Hello everyone. It's been a while. Mostly because of been a while before for uploading any video. I used to think that I would be able to do a lot more of this and just didn't work out because of life, having a family, moving from Milwaukee area up to Jackson for teaching at high school, and so I was hoping this would be like a hobby, like an outlet, just something fun for me to do, to try to emulate a lot of the people. I used to watch a lot more guitar YouTube. I tried to cut back, and now I'm kind of doing it more just as and again, it's kind of a pressure release valve for me. Guitar is just going to be a hobby, an eternal hobby of mine for as long as I'm here on Earth. And part of what got me into guitar in the first place is Van Halen. Listening to Eddie play. One of the first CDs I bought with my own money was a compilation, Best of Both Worlds, and that would have been around like 2005, 2006 maybe, where they did like half and half of the David Lee Roth era, and the other half would have been the Sammy Hagar era. And it was awesome. I gravitated to his earlier stuff first. Now I appreciate the Hagar stuff a lot more. Anyway, fast forward into college when I first pick up guitar, and I really want to learn something. Like, one of the first things I try to learn is running with the devil. And just like those simple chords, because I've been trying to learn the cowboy chords down here. Should tune. But getting to a Van Halen sound has always been a goal of mine. And I used to use just pedals, really cheap Behringer pedals to try to do it. There was a tube amp modeler, and that was okay for a while. Then I went to, well, you can't see it on this camera. I can pull it up on this camera though. I got a Bugera G5 for a birthday present one year, and for a while I was just using the distortion from there as my main sound. And then I went away from that to using pedals like the Pinnacle or the Charlie Brown with a boost. Wampler Pinnacle, the JHS Charlie. Not the Angry Charlie. I would like take a spark and boost into the the Charlie Brown to get a Van Halen sound. But those are very close. And if you use those pedals, they will get you very close. But every time I would play along with recordings, the pedals would always feel like they'd carved out a big chunk of the frequencies, and they were very kind of disappointing. They were good on their own, but when playing along with the recording, just was not as good. And so I've had my eye on this blue pedal right here, the Constable, for a while. The Constable is made by Kingsley amplifiers out of Vancouver, British Columbia, or at least the British Columbia region of Canada, by Simon Jarrett. Saw him first on that pedal show way back, like this has been like 2015, 2016, around the birth of my first son, or a little even before that maybe. And it is the preamplifier of a Marshall Plexi, which of course is what Eddie Van Halen used. Now, if you just use the Constable on its own, right now I've got the tube pilot on as well. If you just use the Constable on its own, it's not going to get you Van Halen, because Ed, of course, turned it on full. And it's two preamp tubes in here, two 12AX7s, because it's two channels, not like channel switching, but two independent channels, the bright channel and the normal channel. what a lot of the overdrive comes from in a Plexi from the late 60s and early 70s is from the phase inverter, which is the third tube in a amplifier like that. And of course there's also interaction with a little bit of interaction with the power tubes from what I understand, and the transformer. And that's how you get the sag and the feel of a really driven Marshall. I don't think well, at least for the time being, I don't think I'll ever be able to do that. The Constable is quite a investment. It's around $400 new. On the used market, it's even more. Good luck trying to get one on the used market for less than $500 maybe, because there's about a 4-month wait period for the pedal. So if you just play the Constable on its own, it is nice, mild overdrive. Beanie Babies are crashing. My wife's trying to sell off. Look at that, it's a Canadian Beanie Baby. You want to go back to British Columbia? Okay. Wow, how fortuitous. We'll put that back in there. It was moved by the power of Van Halen. All right, if you just, this is an HSS Strat made in Mexico from 2013 with I forget what type of humbucker this is. I was trying to think about this before I set up for this video. I want to say it's like around 11K, and it might be an Alnico 4 magnet. Alnico 4 magnets in here. So a little bit different. If you want to get closer to what Ed used, you can use like a distortion, super distortion, or there's also stories of him ripping out PAFs from 335s. If you watch Pete Thorne's video on his deep dive into Van Halen, that would be a good. He also did like just pickup video for Eddie's Frankenstein with the Trem, and then with his Ibanez Destroyer, which was he used a lot of rhythm parts on the early Van Halen albums. Anyway, so that's what I'm using here on full humbucker with just the Constable. If you see the settings there, volume 1 is on full, middle's all the way up, treble and bass to taste. This is in the front end of the, I'll show you this too. You can just use this as a like an overdrive pedal going into the front end. I've got the Wong's Mini 5 and the Quilter Interblock 45. Set like so. I don't know if you can see the Wongs. Mew, mew, mew. Bass is a little bit past half, middle a little bit higher, treble a little back below noon. Volume is pretty low because I'm at home. And that's a part of this, is I don't play in a band, I just play at home for my own enjoyment. So trying to get, you might just say, just use a modeler or plugins, but they're not as good. I have tried those. I've tried pedals, and they all come up short. But this is the best sound I've come up with so far for Van Halen. And I kind of want to do an A/B, trying to look and listen to some isolated tracks of Eddie and kind of compare it to what we can get from this rig. So here's the Constable, finally, just on its own with no other boost. Everything else is off. It's actually not too bad. That is actually that's more gain than I thought it was. But ideally, what you'd use if you went along with what Kingsley tell you, to get the gain from a really driven Marshall to simulate the phase inverter getting hit really hard, you'd put something like a Page. They make this pedal called the Page, a couple different versions of it. And it's just a single 12AX7. 12AX7 is 2 triodes, and he cascades them into each other for that Page. And when you push it with a high level from the Constable, you can get that phase inverter breakup. I'm going a different route. I'm using the TC Electronic Tube Pilot, which is a rather inexpensive pedal. It's like $50, $60. Also has a tube in it. Completely different thing, though. I actually haven't tried it being pushed by the Constable. But I've got the drive set very low, and I've got the output just shy of noon, so that it's hitting the Constable really hard. And the Tube Pilot has very little filtering, so whatever you put into it is what you kind of get out. And it's really open. It's a hard clipping from the tube. I did put in a 12, I took out the 12AX7, I put in 12AT7, which is slightly lower gain. But with the Tube Pilot into the Constable, this is what which I think is pretty close to a Van Halen territory. Certainly not closer than Pinnacle. Now, I don't have any reverb or delay on. If you want to go that next step for recording, you can add some room reverb, like what they did with the sound. What studio did they record Van Halen? A lot of Van Sunset Studios, maybe? They used a room reverb. Eddie would say plate. In a biography, Eddie would say a plate reverb, or had mentioned using a plate reverb, but I've seen videos where they tour Sunset Studios, and the people in those different videos say that it's a room reverb, where they pipe the dry guitar signal in to this room, like concrete room. They have a studio monitor at one end and then a microphone at the other, and they use that as a natural room reverb and that's how you get the big reverb sound from a lot of the early Van Halen records. So you can try to use plugins. IK Multimedia has a set for that, has a plugin for that. You can also use just a little bit of delay. Sometimes I use the tonal recall with solos. I haven't really been practicing any solos recently, so we'll see what happens here. I might need to cut here. It's really subtle. Let's see. Sloppy, bad, but the tonal recall it's got 2 chips in it, and I've got it set to the where it's using both chips at the same time, so there's a long delay and a short delay, and I've got it set that's kind of the quarter note pulse. Not much mix, not much regen, or a little bit more regen, but it acts kind of a little bit more like a reverb than it does a delay. But it also gives like a little bit of a volume boost after the Constable. Anywho, that's the setup. Now I think we will break here and try for... I wanted to do a little bit of a shootout between playing to Somebody Get Me a Doctor, between the isolated guitar track of Eddie and then what I can do here with this rig. So I think we'll break here, get set up for that. Yeah. then let's go back to mine. Mine definitely has a lot more top end. He also has that reverb, which I'm wondering if we could EQ out, or if that's part of the mastering. It's funny, when I tried the Constable into the effects loop of the Bugera and the Quilter, it seemed darker, and I like it brighter through the front ends of the Wongs and the Quilter. So that was kind of interesting. You might be able to get away with some EQing on this and do some delay. See what happens here. What does this sound like? Much more high end too. He is playing through a 412, and I only have two. I only have in the right channel where the Wongs is going to. That is a Green Beret. So that is kind of more what Eddie would use. This is a 10-inch Ragin' Cajun from, I think that's Eminence. So I only have two speakers, a 1x12 and a 1x10. So let's see, you put a little bit more low end here. See what that does. And is definitely different. He's got so much more low end than I do, which also might be indicative of just playing at a lower volume. This is very interesting. This has been an interesting learning experience so far. I'm still very happy with the outcome, and maybe I'll get a what is it called, the Kingsley page sometime down the road to see what that's like. Well, hopefully this all recorded well, and if you're still subscribed to me, that's awesome. And if anyone watches this is fun. I'm doing this more for me. It's a kind of, my wife gave me a day off, or a kind of half a day off, and this is the kind of thing that just gets me excited, and kind of, again, it's a nice pressure release, something fun to do. That's all for today, I think, and I'm going to get to editing this video and see if I can get anything usable out to you. Alright, bye-bye!